Hi, I'm Ross, and today we're in Habakkuk. I feel a desire to put the learning of Habakkuk neatly in a category, and maybe I'd label it breakout for that time when my world's feeling like it's falling apart. Then I could set it aside for an emergency in the future. But I thought better of it because it flavors how I think about life in normal times. Why? Because human perspective is equally limited in the usual and in distress. And God's view is always infinitely complete. When we do life with God, He bends down and takes us by the hand and teaches us to walk. I love that imagery in Hosea 11. We ask questions, and His answers increase our confidence in Him. We gain insights about God and ourselves, and we learn and we fail and we learn, and it feels like we're making some progress. But for all the rich insights into God, God's word, and ourselves, stuff comes along that just plain distresses us, and human explanations don't satisfy. This prophetic book records an interaction between Habakkuk and God. Habakkuk's distress prompts questions, and God speaks. God speaks in direct words to Habakkuk, which are recorded right on the page. And Habakkuk's words back to God are recorded too. And through that interaction, we see Habakkuk coming to a new trust level in God as Savior, even though the situation is unchanged. It's important that we read and study this interaction between Habakkuk and God. We will learn from these 3 short chapters, but this is the sort of learning that readies us for the deep learning that only comes by living it. It's my opinion that the deep transformation in us, that might have to wait until we have our own interaction with God. It might be that distressing situation is where we begin to own the radical trust that Habakkuk expressed. Let's pray as we get started. Lord, thank you for the learning and reminders that came out of our group discussion time in Habakkuk. Habakkuk modeled for us bringing questions and listening for answers from you, our sovereign and good God. Grow us up, just like you did Habakkuk, to his beautiful expression of trust, even during the hard stuff of life. In Jesus' name. Let's begin at the end. God has explained that a vast marauding army would soon bring suffering and death at an unknown scale. In that second to last verse, Habakkuk declares his response on the front end of the invasion and coming famine. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. Guys, I find this sort of joy in seeming chaos otherworldly and outside my experience. Habakkuk and I might have more in common than it might seem at first. I don't want to compare the severity of the situation, but I see the same societal crash happening in my own country. The list is endless, but people shot for ringing the wrong doorbell, pulling into the wrong driveway, and retrieving a basketball that rolled into the neighbor's yard. Unlike me, Habakkuk is told of the judgment to come. Thus, his temptation to fear is greater than mine. Since I don't know what's coming, I don't expect to experience that level of distress personally. But distress is what comes in our world of sin and death. Faithful Habakkuk got to the place of rejoicing and joy in the midst of a distressing, puzzling situation with no happily ever after story in sight. We will recount Habakkuk's progression, but I didn't see a formula to have joy like Habakkuk. But let's just start. Maybe there's something better than formulae. Last week, the discussion's questions had us look up the concept of lament. I wrote down passionate expression of grief or sorrow. Lament characterizes Habakkuk's first two questions for God. These were genuine, honest questions. And in the asking, we see Habakkuk's deep distress and inability to make sense of the situation. Pop psychology might point out that the practice of asking humanly answerable questions, that process, maybe it's cathartic. That means it would bring some relief just by verbally dumping the story on someone else. It may have some benefit, but I don't see it getting us to the place of joy that Habakkuk declared. Habakkuk takes it up with God himself. I love this. It reveals that Habakkuk knows that God is still on the throne and prayer changes things. This may seem like a small thing, but to take up the matter with God himself is such a good start. It's the right instinct, and I'm cheering on our brother, Hab. Chapter 1, verse 2 says this: How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you don't listen, or cry out violence, but you don't save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me, and their strife and conflict abounds. Therefore, the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted. These words describe our nation, and they describe to an even greater degree the war-torn or gang-infested nations where the law is paralyzed. For Habakkuk, it was describing his world then. It was describing Jerusalem and Judah after the people had left God behind. And Habakkuk says, God, I know you listen and save, but I'm not feeling heard, and there's no saving going on. His question, what happened to the listening and the saving? Habakkuk wrote down God's answer. Reading it built up my anticipation for a sweeping instant fix. Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed, for I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. My eagerness for God's big move went right down the drain with these next words. I'm raising up the Babylonians. God goes on to remind us they're a feared and dreaded people. This has gone sideways. Habakkuk complains about his dysfunctional government, culture, and church. God's answer is to send worse folks to bring misery, torture, and death. That's like going to the doctor for a rash and coming home with an amputation. Let's just say it. Getting worse is not what we had in mind and naturally leads to dismay, not hope, not joy. Again, I have great admiration for Habakkuk's response. He heads right back to God, bearing his heart in 1 verse 12. Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. In that statement, Habakkuk lays claim to God as his God, eternal and holy. And then in 1:13, you, Lord, have appointed them, those Babylonians, to execute justice. You are my rock, and have ordained them to punish. Okay, he recognizes God's prerogative to execute judgment via this fearful people. And then continuing in verse 13, your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? He states that God can't leave these wicked to benefit from their evil doing. Let me read chapter 2, verse 1. I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he has to say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. I like it that Habakkuk commits to the work of listening for God's response. It involves active watching for it. I know that God still speaks. I know that he's willing to lead. Of course he's willing to lead. Come follow me is Jesus' signature line. Active watching and waiting for God's lead is where I need practice. How might it change the outcome if you or I stand and watch and station ourselves on the ramparts? It takes faith to expect and then watch for an answer. God answers in chapter 2, verse 2. Write this down and take out a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal. It's coming. Coming is a time, and it's coming at a time certain, and wait for it. Those marauders, they're prideful, and they're going to get taken out. But while the tape recorders are still running, God says this one tiny line about the righteous, followed by 15 verses declaring the punishment of Babylon. It's easy to miss if it weren't so foundational. But the righteous will live by faith. This line is so foundational. We need to read it where it first appears, Genesis 15:6. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited to him as righteousness. Abram believed the Lord, and God credited it to him as righteousness. Let me repeat that same line as it's quoted in Romans 1:17. The righteous shall live by faith. Those who evidence faith now have eternal life. This is a joy-filled, good news promise in the midst of a bad news situation. The wicked Judeans will meet with judgment. The godless Babylonians will meet with judgment. The faithful remnant will live forever with the God in whom they trusted. As scary as it sounds, it appears to me that everybody gets what they wanted: separation from God or being in God's presence eternally. Pop psychology looks for a formula. Religious fakery looks to check the boxes. God sees the heart, and so it's in the heart where he brings the transformation in his people. While others look for formulae, God looks for faith. So who gets the gift of faith? Remember what I thought I had observed. Everybody gets what they want. Hear Jesus' sincere promise to everyone who will ever live in John 6:37. All those the Father gives me will come to me, and whomever comes to me, I will never drive away. The world has a lot of fun mocking the come to Jesus moment. But the fact is that anyone that clings to Jesus gets Jesus forever. Joy guaranteed. Do you believe it's that simple? Consider the thief on the cross. He was a criminal and mocking Jesus moments before he had a miraculous turn and decided that he was going to cling to Jesus with these words, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." There's a video clip of a preacher making the internet rounds. In it, the preacher imagines what it was like when this thief, showed up at the pearly gates. The angel asked what he was doing there. He didn't know. The angel asked him if he'd ever been to a Bible study, and he says, no. The angel has to go get his supervisor, and his supervisor asked the guy some basic doctrinal stuff. He's never heard of it. Then the angel asked this question: on what basis should you be let in? And he responds with this: the guy on the middle cross said I could come. The principle within this section is indeed the righteous will live by faith. And I'm not trying to improve on that, but just to get myself to appreciate it in a fresh way, I chose to write it down this way: anybody that clings to Jesus gets Jesus forever. Anybody that clings to Jesus gets Jesus forever. Remember where we're going here. We're trying to figure out how Habakkuk got to the place where he could say, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. Growing up, my mother would use a word from the old country to command reverent silence. Us kids knew she meant business. I hear an echo of that in 2 verse 20. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. At this point, Habakkuk goes to prayer. Lord, I've heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. Then he goes on to recount God's eye-popping power over people and nature. And in 3:16, he's shaking so bad he can hardly stand. It's not crystal clear to me if he fears God's power or Babylon's coming terror, but either are scary enough. His response? Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. There's change in attitude. He can now wait for God's justice to show up on the wicked. And in the face of deadly famine, Habakkuk says this, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. Oh, now we can take this as a nice story. We can take this as what some sort of super Christian might experience. Or we can think, here is a guy that had real questions for God, and somehow in that interaction from God went from distressed, knee-knocking terror to joy that rejoiced, to mountain-scaling confidence. And somewhere in the middle of all that, God whispered, the righteous will live by faith. When we learn mathematics, we don't start with calculus. We start with sums. Look to be faithful in the small adversities, and there'll be lots of opportunities to scale up. And let's make that our principle. Be faithful, praising in adversity. Be faithful, praising in adversity and in adversity. What worries need to be turned into questions for God? How might getting God involved bring you to counting it all joy? We followed Habakkuk from distress to the heights. He started with the question, how long and why? And he ended at, the sovereign Lord is my strength. Let's rerun that in a compacted form. But this time, let's listen for hints of God's sovereignty in the matter. We readily see the bad situation the guy was in. Judah was dysfunctional in government, culture, and religion. They were about to get misery, torture, and death from the Babylonians. But it ends with a declaration of faith, including this unlikely line, I will be joyful in God my Savior. But it doesn't stop there. Habakkuk goes on to declare that he's walking around in strength that can be only attributed to the Lord. So let's trace the path from questioning God in the midst of hardship to walking on the heights. Questions. Habakkuk brought his why right to God himself. Listening. After asking, he got serious with expectant listening. Faith. God promises that faith is how the righteous live. Reverence. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. Awe. In prayer, Habakkuk expresses awe, recounting God's power on the behalf of his people, including himself, including us. Petition. He asks for God to move again while remembering mercy. Patience. Deciding to be patient even when God delays judgment on the wicked. Praise. Joy, not at the adverse circumstance, but in God, my Savior. Strength. God's strength enabled walking on the heights. Our principle is God is sovereign, but he is good. God is sovereign, but he is good. We should be ready to acknowledge God is sovereign. But when we get an inkling of God's goodness, and then hear of his mercy on us, that leads to joy. Joy expressed is praise. Being convinced that every circumstance is in the Lord's good plan, that leads to strength. God uses challenging situations to teach you and I to find our security only in him. God's good plan can't be thwarted by anyone or anything, and that comfort brings truth. And that truth brings comfort. Sorry about that. How will what we know about God give us peace when we just can't comprehend life's events? Habakkuk didn't get to see the big picture, but he knew the one who he trusted with the big picture. We started at the end, so let's go back to the beginning. Habakkuk, the book, started with Habakkuk, the man, asking questions of God, a sovereign God, not threatened at all or frustrated with our questions. Habakkuk got what answers to his what's coming questions. But I didn't see that he got much comfort in those what answers. Habakkuk's comfort rested solidly in the who answers. Habakkuk got a renewed assurance of God's character as he stated and demonstrated in history, meaning his story, recorded for us in his word with the Spirit confirming its truth in our hearts. Last week, I ran into a 30-something who I had as a kid in our church's boys ministry. Will told me what he remembered from that. I was hoping for the grandiose, but Will pointed to simply this. It was there he learned to pray ACTS, acts, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication. That pattern's from Matthew 6, verse 9. Adoring God and reminding ourselves of his mighty acts on our behalf came just before Habakkuk's transformation at the end of chapter 3. Could it be that losing ourselves in wonder, love, and praise brings us to the place where with Habakkuk, we can proclaim our joy in God, our Savior? Let's finish up with that very same prayer Habakkuk prayed in chapter 3. I'll skip around. So here's some things for which to listen. Habakkuk will mention saving his anointed one. In this particular case, that's the saving of Israel, his kingdom of priests. That means you. And when you hear about crushing, you guessed it. That's the head crush mentioned in Genesis 3:15, where the serpent's head is crushed. And don't miss these key words: wait, rejoice, joyful, sovereign. Let's go to God in prayer. Lord, I've heard of your fame, and I stand in awe of your deeds. Repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. His glory covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth. His splendor was like sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand, where his power was hidden. In wrath, you strode through the earth, and in anger, you threshed the nations. You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the leader of the land of wickedness. You stripped him from head to foot. I heard and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones and my legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. Though the fig tree does not bud and there's no grapes on the vine, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there's no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stores, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. in our prayer, Lord, be glorified. Amen.